The sound of a wounded coyote's whimper cut through the dusty air of Pendleton, Oregon, in the summer of 1882, and Clayton Quincy reined in his horse to investigate what fool would be tending to a wild animal in the middle of nowhere. He had been riding the property line of his sprawling ranch for 3 hours now, checking fences and water sources, when he spotted a woman crouched near the creek bed with a creature that could easily turn on her at any moment. His first instinct was to call out a warning, but something in her posture, the gentle way her hands moved over the animal's leg, made him stay silent and watch instead. She wore a simple calico dress that had seen better days, the hem dusty and torn in places. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical bun, though several strands had escaped to frame her face. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, close to his own age of 26. What struck him most was not her appearance but the utter calm she radiated as she worked on the animal's injured paw. The coyote, which should have been snapping and snarling, lay relatively still under her ministrations, as if it understood she meant no harm. Clayton dismounted quietly, tying his bay gelding to a nearby cottonwood. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle either the woman or the animal. As he got closer, he could hear her speaking in low, soothing tones. "There now, I know it hurts," she murmured. "But that trap did a number on you, did it not? Just a bit more and I will have you fixed up." He stopped about 10 feet away, watching as she carefully wrapped the coyote's paw with strips of cloth. She had already cleaned the wound, he could see, and applied some kind of salve. The efficiency of her movements suggested this was not the first time she had done such work. "That animal could bite your hand clean off," Clayton finally said, his deep voice breaking the quiet. She did not jump or startle, which surprised him. Instead, she glanced up briefly, meeting his eyes with a steady gaze that was neither frightened nor defiant. Her eyes were a striking gray-green, the color of sage after rain. "He could," she agreed, turning her attention back to the coyote. "But he will not. Animals know when you are trying to help them." "Not always," Clayton countered, moving a bit closer. "I have seen plenty of folks get hurt trying to help wild things. Then they were not doing it right," she said simply, tying off the bandage. "There, you are all set, friend. Now get along and stay away from those traps." To Clayton's amazement, she simply stood up and stepped back, and the coyote struggled to its feet. It looked at her for a long moment, then limped off into the brush, favoring the wrapped paw but moving steadily. She turned to face him fully now, wiping her hands on a rag she pulled from her pocket. Up close, he could see the smattering of freckles across her nose, the determined set of her jaw. She was not conventionally beautiful in the way of the saloon girls in town, but there was something compelling about her, something that made it hard to look away. "I am Clayton Quincy," he said, removing his hat. "I own the ranch that borders this creek." "Beatrice Dalton," she replied. "Most people call me B. I am staying with my aunt in town while I figure out what to do next." "What to do next?" he repeated. She looked away toward the creek. "My parents died this past winter, influenza. They had a small farm in Nebraska, but it went to pay their debts. I came out here because my aunt wrote and said there might be opportunities, though I am beginning to think she was just being kind." "I am sorry for your loss," Clayton said, and meant it. He had lost his own parents to a wagon accident 5 years ago, which is how he had ended up running the ranch at such a young age. "What kind of opportunities are you looking for?" "Honest work," B said, meeting his eyes again. "I am good with animals. I can cook and clean too, but what I really know is animal care. My father was a veterinarian before he took up farming. He taught me everything he knew." An idea was forming in Clayton's mind, but he pushed it aside for the moment. "You should not be out here alone." This is rough country and not everyone who rides through is friendly. I can take care of myself, she said, but there was no hostility in her tone. But I appreciate the concern. I should be getting back anyway. My aunt will worry. I will ride with you, Clayton offered. If you are heading to town. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. I walked out, but I would not say no to a ride if you are offering. I am. He gestured to his horse. Jupiter here is strong enough for two. Clayton mounted first, then reached down to help her up. Her hand was calloused and strong in his, the hand of someone who worked hard and did not shy from it. She settled behind him, and he was acutely aware of her presence, the way she held onto his waist lightly, giving him space but secure enough not to fall. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the steady clop of Jupiter's hooves and the distant call of a hawk. The land spread out around them in rolling hills covered with bunch grass and sage, the blue mountains visible in the distance. It was beautiful country, harsh and unforgiving at times, but Clayton loved it with a fierce pride. How large is your ranch? Bea asked after a while. About 1,500 acres, Clayton replied. I run cattle mostly, some horses. I have a small crew, 4 full-time hands and a few others who come during busy seasons. That is a substantial operation for someone your age, she observed. He smiled slightly. I did not have much choice. When my parents died, it was either figure out how to run it or sell out. I was not about to sell. This land has been in my family for 20 years, since right after my father came back from the war. The war between the states, she asked. Yes, he fought for the Union, came west afterward with my mother. They built the ranch from nothing. He paused. It means something to keep that going. I understand, Bea said quietly. I wish I could have kept my father's farm, but the debt was too much. Sometimes I dream about having land of my own again someday. They reached the outskirts of Pendleton as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the mountains. The town was bustling with activity, as it always was this time of day. Freight wagons rumbled down Main Street, cowboys from various ranches lounged outside the saloons, and proper townswomen in their better dresses hurried to finish their errands before supper time. Where is your aunt's house? Clayton asked. On Willow Street, the little white house with the blue shutters. He knew the place, a tidy cottage near the edge of town. When they arrived, Bea slid down from the horse with practiced ease. Thank you for the ride, Mr. Quincy, she said formally. Clayton, he corrected. And it was no trouble. She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her serious face. Thank you, Clayton. He touched his hat brim. Good day, Miss Dalton. As he rode away, he found himself thinking about her gentle hands on that coyote, the calm certainty with which she had worked. His ranch did need someone with that kind of touch. He had lost 2 good horses in the past year to injuries that might have been treatable with proper care. The local veterinarian was over in Baker City, 2 days' ride away, and was more inclined to put down an injured animal than try to heal it. The idea that had formed earlier came back stronger now. He needed someone with veterinary skills, someone who could tend to the animals on the ranch. And Bea Dalton needed work. It seemed like a solution that would benefit them both, but there was a problem and he knew it. A single man hiring a single woman to work on his ranch would set tongues wagging all over town. It would damage her reputation and his, never mind that it was legitimate work. The society ladies of Pendleton had strict ideas about propriety, and he had already heard enough gossip about himself to last a lifetime. Still, the thought would not leave him. He spent the evening doing his usual chores, checking on the horses in the stable, reviewing the books in his study, eating a solitary dinner that his housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, had left for him before she went home to her own family. The whole time, he kept seeing Bee's steady hands, hearing her calm voice. The next morning, Clayton rode into town with a purpose. He had made his decision overnight, lying in his bed and staring at the ceiling. He would offer Bee the job, but he would do it right. He would make sure there were conditions that protected both of them from gossip. He found her at the general store, helping her aunt select fabric. The aunt was a plump, kindly-looking woman in her 50s with gray streaked hair and a warm smile. When Clayton approached and asked to speak with Bee privately, the aunt's eyes sharpened with interest, but she nodded and moved away to give them space. "Miss Dalton," Clayton began, keeping his voice low, "I have a proposition for you, a job offer to be precise." She looked up from the bolt of cloth she had been examining, surprise evident on her face. "A job offer?" "Yes. As I mentioned, I run a sizable ranch. I need someone who can tend to the animals when they are injured or ill. What I saw you do yesterday with that coyote convinced me you have the skills I need." He paused. "But I am aware of how it would look, a single woman working on a ranch with a single man, so I would propose this. You would have your own quarters, completely separate from the main house. Mrs. Chen, my housekeeper, would be present during the day, and I would pay you fair wages, same as I pay my ranch hands." Bee stared at him, her gray-green eyes searching his face. "You are serious?" "Completely. I would draw up a proper contract if you want, make it all legal and above board." "What kind of wages are we talking about?" she asked, ever practical. He named a figure that made her eyebrows rise. It was generous, more than generous, but he could afford it and he needed someone good. "That is more than fair," she said slowly. "But what about your reputation? Surely this would cause talk." "Let them talk," Clayton said with a shrug. "I need good help and you need good work. That should be enough for anyone with sense." She smiled slightly. "Not everyone in Pendleton has sense from what I have observed." "True enough." He waited, watching her think it through. "When would I start?" she asked finally. "As soon as you are able, tomorrow if you can manage it." She glanced over at her aunt, who was pretending to examine calico prints but was clearly trying to listen. "I will need to discuss it with my aunt. She has been kind to take me in and I do not want her to think I am ungrateful." "Of course. I will be at the Silver Dollar Cafe having lunch at noon. You can give me your answer then." "All right," Bee agreed. "I will be there." Clayton left the store feeling more hopeful than he had in months. There was something about Beatrice Dalton that intrigued him beyond her skills with animals. She had a quiet strength, a resilience that he recognized because he shared it. Life had knocked both of them down, but they had gotten back up and kept going. At noon precisely, he sat in the cafe with a cup of coffee, waiting. The food here was decent, better than his own cooking anyway, and the owner made excellent pie. He had just started on a slice of apple when Bee walked in, her aunt beside her. They approached his table and he stood immediately, gesturing for them to sit. "Mr. Quincy," the aunt began. "I am Martha Dalton, Bee's aunt. She told me about your offer." "Yes, madam," Clayton said respectfully. "It is unusual, I will not deny that. But Bee tells me you have made provisions to protect her reputation, and Lord knows the girl needs to make her way in the world." Martha's eyes were shrewd as she studied him. "I have asked around about you this morning. People say you are honest and hardworking, that you treat your employees fairly." "I try to, madam. They also say you mind your own business and expect others to mind theirs, which I appreciate." She turned to Bee. "It is your decision, dear, but I think it could be a good opportunity." Bee looked at Clayton directly. "I accept your offer, Mr. Quincy." "When should I arrive at the ranch?" Relief and something else, something warmer, flooded through him. "Tomorrow morning would be perfect. I will send a wagon for your things at 8. "I do not have many things," Bee said, "but I appreciate it nonetheless." They worked out the details over lunch. Clayton explained more about the ranch, the animals they kept, the kinds of injuries and illnesses she might encounter. Bee asked intelligent questions that showed her knowledge. She had indeed learned well from her father. The next morning, true to his word, Clayton sent his most trusted ranch hand, an older man named Pete Sullivan, to collect Bee and her belongings. He had spent the previous evening making sure the small cabin that would be hers was clean and properly furnished. It was not much, just a single room with a bed, a stove, a table and chairs, but it was sturdy and private, situated about 100 yards from the main house. He was in the stable when Pete's wagon rolled up. Clayton walked out to meet them, noting that Bee's possessions fit in 2 modest trunks and a carpet bag. She climbed down from the wagon before he could offer help, looking around at the ranch with obvious interest. "Welcome to the Quincy Ranch," Clayton said. "It is beautiful," Bee replied, and she sounded sincere. "Those are the Blue Mountains, are they not?" "Yes, good grazing land up in the foothills when the weather cooperates." He gestured toward the cabin. "Let me show you your quarters first, then I will give you a tour of the property." The cabin met with her approval, he could tell, though she did not say much. She simply looked around, taking in the details, then nodded. "This will do very well, thank you." Mrs. Chen stocked the stove with wood and put some basic supplies in the cupboard, Clayton explained. "You will take your meals at the main house, though. No sense in you having to cook for yourself after working all day." "That is kind of you." Pete helped them carry her trunks inside, then tipped his hat and headed back to his own work. Clayton and Bee stood somewhat awkwardly for a moment before Clayton cleared his throat. "Would you like to see the stock now? Get a sense of what you will be working with?" "Very much," Bee said eagerly. They spent the next 2 hours walking the ranch. Clayton showed her the main stable, where they kept the working horses and his small breeding stock. He introduced her to each animal, telling her their names and personalities. Bee greeted each horse with a gentle touch and soft words, and Clayton could see them responding to her immediately. "This is Lady," he said, stopping at a stall that held a beautiful chestnut mare. "She is my best breeding mare, but she cut her leg on barbed wire 3 weeks ago. The wound healed, but she has been favoring it ever since. I think something is still bothering her, but I cannot figure out what." Bee stepped into the stall without hesitation. Lady's ears went back briefly, then forward again as Bee spoke to her soothingly. "Hello there, beautiful girl. Let me see that leg, will you?" Clayton watched as she ran her hands down the mare's leg with expert precision, feeling for heat or swelling. Lady, who had been skittish with anyone approaching that leg, stood perfectly still. "There," Bee said after a moment. "Do you feel this? There is heat here, just above the fetlock. And some swelling, very slight. I think a piece of wire is still in there, too small to see but causing infection." Clayton stepped forward, checking where she indicated. She was right, there was warmth he had not noticed before. "Can you remove it? I can try. I will need some supplies, though." "Clean cloths, hot water, tweezers or a small knife, and some carbolic acid if you have it." "I will get everything," Clayton said, impressed by her confidence. 20 minutes later, they were back in the stall with supplies. Bee worked with calm efficiency, cleaning the area around the wound, then making a small incision to drain the infected tissue. Lady shifted but did not fight, responding to Bee's constant stream of soothing words. Finally, Bee extracted a tiny piece of wire, no bigger than a splinter, and held it up. "That was the culprit," she announced. "Now we clean it properly and she should heal up fine." She flushed the wound with carbolic solution, applied a healing salve, and wrapped the leg securely. Through it all, Clayton watched her hands, mesmerized by their sureness and grace. "You really do have a gift," he said when she was finished, Bee glanced at him, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw her cheeks color slightly. My father said the same thing. He wanted me to go to veterinary school, but they do not accept women. That is their loss, Clayton said firmly. She smiled at that, a real smile that made her eyes light up. Thank you. Now, what else needs attention around here? They spent the rest of the day going over all the animals. She checked the cattle in the nearest pasture, examined several horses that had minor ailments, and made notes in a small journal she produced from her pocket. By the time the sun was setting, Clayton knew he had made the right decision. Beatrice Dalton was exactly what his ranch needed. Mrs. Chen had prepared a substantial dinner, and they ate at the big table in the main house. It felt strange to Clayton, having someone else there for the meal. He usually ate alone, occasionally with Pete or one of the other hands if they needed to discuss business. But having Bee across from him felt different, more intimate somehow, even though they talked only of the ranch and the animals. I should turn in, Bee said after they finished. Tomorrow I want to start early, check on Lady and go through the rest of the stock more thoroughly. Of course, Clayton stood when she did, remembering his manners. I will walk you back to your cabin. That is not necessary, she protested. Maybe not, but I will do it anyway. Like I said before, this is rough country. They walked together in the gathering darkness, the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night around them. Crickets chirped in the grass, and somewhere in the distance, a cow lowed softly. The air had cooled considerably, as it always did in the high desert once the sun set. At her cabin door, Bee turned to face him. Thank you, Clayton, for the opportunity, for trusting me. Thank you for accepting, he replied. I have a feeling things are going to be better around here with you on board. She laughed softly. I hope so. Good night. Good night, Bee. He walked back to the main house slowly, his mind full of thoughts about the auburn-haired woman who had entered his life so suddenly. He barely knew her, yet there was something about her that called to him. Perhaps it was her strength, or her gentleness with the animals, or simply the fact that she understood what it meant to lose everything and have to start over. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Bee proved herself invaluable from the start. She not only tended to injured animals, but began implementing preventative care that Clayton had never thought of. She checked the horses' teeth regularly, advised on nutrition, and caught small problems before they became big ones. The ranch hands, initially skeptical about a woman doing what they considered man's work, quickly came to respect her. Pete, in particular, became one of her biggest supporters after she successfully treated his favorite horse for colic. That little lady saved Rusty's life, Pete told Clayton one afternoon. I have seen horses die from colic more times than I can count, but she knew exactly what to do. Clayton had been there too, watching as Bee walked the suffering horse for hours, administered treatments, and refused to give up even when it looked hopeless. Rusty had pulled through, and Pete had been her loyal defender ever since. As spring turned to summer, Clayton found himself looking for excuses to be wherever Bee was working. He told himself it was to learn from her, to understand how to better care for his animals. But deep down, he knew the truth. He was falling for her, falling hard and fast in a way that both excited and terrified him. She was unlike any woman he had ever known. She did not simper or flirt, did not play games or manipulate. She was straightforward and honest, hardworking and intelligent. She could discuss anything from animal husbandry to politics to literature, and she held her own in any conversation. But more than that, there was a softness beneath her practical exterior, a tenderness that showed in how she cared for every creature that crossed her path. He had seen her nurse a baby bird back to health, splint the broken leg of a rabbit, even tend to a snake that had been injured by one of the ranch hands. All God's creatures deserve compassion, she had said when he questioned her about the snake. One evening in late June, after a particularly long day, Clayton invited Bea to sit with him on the porch of the main house. Mrs. Chen had left fresh lemonade, and the evening was pleasant, with a cool breeze coming down from the mountains. "How are you finding ranch life?" Clayton asked, handing her a glass. "I love it," Bea said simply. "I know that might sound strange, but I truly do. Every day is different, every animal is a new challenge, and I love being out here, away from town and all its restrictions." "What restrictions do you mean?" She was quiet for a moment, looking out at the darkening landscape. "In town, there are so many rules about what a woman can and cannot do, where she can go, how she should behave. Out here, I can just be myself. I can work hard and be useful, and nobody questions it." "Well, Pete did it first," Clayton said with a smile. Bea laughed. "Yes, but he came around. They all have, really. Your crew is a good group of men." "They are," Clayton agreed. "I am lucky to have them, and lucky to have you." She turned to look at him, and in the fading light her eyes were luminous. "I am the lucky one, Clayton. You gave me a chance when you did not have to. You trusted me." "You have more than earned that trust," he said quietly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their lemonade and watching the stars begin to appear. Clayton wanted to say more, wanted to tell her how much she had come to mean to him, but the words stuck in his throat. What if she did not feel the same way? What if she saw him only as an employer, a means to earn her living? "I should go," Bea said eventually, standing up. "Early start tomorrow." "Right." Clayton stood as well, disappointed but not surprised. "Let me walk you, Clayton," she said as they walked toward her cabin. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why have you never married? You are young, you have a successful ranch, you are." She hesitated, then continued, "You are a good man. Surely there have been women interested." He was glad for the darkness that hid the flush he felt creeping up his neck. "There have been a few," he admitted, "but none that felt right. I always figured I would know when I met the right woman, that there would be something that just clicked into place. And you have not felt that click yet." Her voice was carefully neutral. They had reached her cabin. He stopped, looking down at her face in the moonlight. His heart was pounding, and he thought, to hell with caution. Life was too short and uncertain not to take chances. "Actually, I have," he said quietly. "Recently." He saw her breath catch, saw her eyes widen slightly. "Oh." "Bea, I know this is probably not proper, and I know I am your employer, so this puts you in an awkward position, but I have to be honest with you. These past months, getting to know you, watching you work, talking with you, I have developed feelings for you, strong feelings." She stared at him, her expression unreadable in the shadows. The silence stretched out, and Clayton felt his heart sink. He had misread the situation, had ruined everything. But then she smiled, soft and wondering. "Clayton Quincy, are you telling me you have fallen for me?" "Yes," he said simply. "I have, completely." "Good," she whispered, "because I have fallen for you too." The relief that flooded through him was so intense it was almost painful. "Really, really." "I tried not to. I told myself it was foolish, that you were my employer and I should not complicate things. But I cannot help how I feel. You are kind and honest and hardworking. You treat everyone fairly, from me to the lowest ranch hand to the animals in your care. And when you smile, really smile, my heart does this funny little flip." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But she did not pull away. Instead, she stepped closer, and he cupped her face gently with his hands. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Please," she breathed. He lowered his head and kissed her softly, reverently. Her lips were warm and soft, and when she sighed against his mouth and kissed him back, He felt something inside him settle and ignite at the same time. This was what he had been waiting for, this connection, this rightness. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks now." "Only weeks," she teased. "I have wanted to do it since the day you found me with that coyote." He laughed, joy bubbling up inside him. "Why did you not say something?" "For the same reason you did not, I expect. Fear, uncertainty, not wanting to ruin what we had." "So what do we do now?" he asked. She pulled back enough to look into his eyes. "We see where this goes. We take it slow, maybe, because I do not want to be foolish. But we see where it goes." "I can do slow," Clayton promised, though every fiber of his being wanted to pull her close again and never let go. "Though I should warn you, I am not very good at hiding my feelings. The whole ranch is probably going to know before the week is out." "Let them know," Bea said, echoing his words from months ago. "Let them talk. We are not doing anything wrong." "No," he agreed. "We are not." They kissed again, longer this time, and when they finally separated, Clayton felt as if he was walking on air. He bid her good night and headed back to the house, but he did not think he would sleep much. His mind was too full of her, of possibilities, of the future. Over the next weeks and months, their relationship deepened and grew. Clayton courted her properly, bringing her wildflowers from the meadow, taking her on picnic rides to his favorite spots on the ranch, sitting with her in the evenings and talking about everything and nothing. He learned her history in detail, the happy years with her parents, the devastating loss of them, the struggle to survive afterward. She learned his story too, his childhood on the ranch, the war stories his father had rarely told, the weight of responsibility he had carried since becoming the ranch's owner. They shared dreams and fears, hopes and disappointments. They laughed together and worked together. And slowly, inevitably, they fell deeper in love. The town gossips did talk, as they had known they would, but Clayton and Bea ignored them. They had done nothing wrong, and their relationship was nobody's business but their own. Martha, Bea's aunt, approved wholeheartedly. She visited the ranch regularly and could see how happy her niece was. "He is a good man," Martha told Bea during one visit. "And more importantly, he sees you for who you really are and values that. Not every man would." By autumn, Clayton knew he wanted to marry her. He had known it for months, really, but he wanted to be sure she was ready. One crisp October evening, he asked her to go for a ride with him. He led her to his favorite spot on the ranch, a high meadow overlooking the valley, where the aspens were turning gold and the air smelled of wood smoke and coming winter. They dismounted, and Clayton spread a blanket on the ground. They sat together, watching the sun sink toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. "This is my favorite place in the world," Clayton said. "I used to come here with my father. He would sit right here and talk about his dreams for the ranch, for me, for the future." "It is beautiful," Bea said softly. "Thank you for sharing it with me." "Bea," Clayton turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "I love you. I love your strength and your gentleness, your intelligence and your compassion. I love how you care for every living thing, how you are not afraid of hard work, how you make me laugh even on the hardest days. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "It was my mother's," he explained. "My father gave it to her when they married. I know it is not fancy, but I would be honored if you would wear it. Beatrice Dalton, will you marry me?" Tears sparkled in her eyes, catching the last light of the sun. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Clayton, I will marry you. I love you too so much." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, pouring all his love and joy into it. She kissed him back with equal fervor, and they held each other as the sun disappeared and the stars began to appear overhead. They were married 6 weeks later, on a crisp November day in the small church in Pendleton. Martha was there, beaming with pride, along with Pete and the other ranch hands and half the town. Even some of the gossips who had whispered about them showed up, curious and perhaps a bit ashamed that their dire predictions had not come true. Bea wore a simple dress of cream-colored silk that Martha had helped her make. Clayton wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his boots polished to a shine. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Clayton kissed his bride with such tenderness that several of the ladies in attendance had to dab at their eyes. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed an army. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself, and people ate and drank and danced to the music of a fiddle player from town. It was a joyous celebration, and Clayton thought his heart might burst from happiness as he danced with his wife under the clear November sky. That night, Bea moved her few possessions from the small cabin to the main house, to the room that would now be theirs together. Clayton was nervous, despite himself, wanting everything to be perfect for her. But Bea, practical and loving as always, simply took his hand and led him inside, and all his nervousness melted away in the warmth of her embrace. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. Running a ranch was hard work, and there were difficulties with weather and market prices and difficult animals. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. Bea continued her work with the animals, and her reputation spread. Soon, neighboring ranchers were asking if she would come look at their stock, and Clayton was proud to see her skills recognized. They settled into a comfortable life, working side by side during the day, spending evenings together on the porch or by the fire, depending on the season. They talked and laughed and made love, and Clayton thought he had never been so content. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Bea told him she was pregnant. He whooped with joy and picked her up, spinning her around until she laughingly begged him to stop. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "A baby." "We are," she confirmed, her face glowing. "In October, the doctor thinks." He was protective of her throughout the pregnancy, wanting her to rest more, to let him take over the heavier work with the animals. Bea humored him to a point but refused to be treated as an invalid. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him gently. "I am not made of glass." "I know," he said, "but you are precious to me, and so is this baby. Let me worry about you, it makes me feel useful." She softened at that, and agreed to take things a bit easier, though she still insisted on doing her work with the animals, at least until the last month. Their son was born on a cold October night in 1884, 2 years almost to the day after Clayton had first seen Bea tending that wounded coyote. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Clayton feared he might lose her. But Bea was strong, and when the baby finally came, wailing lustily, Clayton wept with relief and joy. They named him Daniel after Bea's father. He had Clayton's dark hair and Bea's gray-green eyes, and Clayton thought he was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Fatherhood changed Clayton in ways he had not expected. He had thought he understood love, but holding his son, watching Bea nurse him, seeing the family they had created together, opened up new dimensions of feeling he had not known existed. He was fiercely protective of them both, determined to give them the best life possible. As Daniel grew, he showed signs of inheriting his mother's gift with animals. Even as a toddler, he was gentle with the ranch dogs, unafraid of the horses, fascinated by every creature. Bea taught him as her father had taught her, and Clayton loved watching them together, his wife and his son. heads bent over some small creature that needed care. 3 years after Daniel was born, Bee gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, after Clayton's mother. She had auburn hair like her mother and a sunny disposition that charmed everyone. Daniel adored his little sister, and Clayton often found him showing her the animals, explaining things to her in his serious 3-year-old way. Life was good, better than Clayton had ever imagined it could be. The ranch prospered, partly because of his hard work and smart management, but also because Bee's care of the animals meant they had healthier stock and better breeding results. They expanded gradually, buying more land when neighboring properties came up for sale. Pete, now in his 60s, retired from active ranch work, but stayed on as a sort of consultant and honorary grandfather to the children. He lived in the small cabin that had once been Bee's, and the children visited him daily to hear his stories and eat the peppermints he always seemed to have in his pockets. Martha, too, remained a constant presence in their lives. She moved to a small house on the ranch property after arthritis made it difficult for her to maintain her place in town. She helped watch the children when Bee was working, and her wisdom and humor were a blessing to the whole family. The years passed, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the growing seasons. Daniel grew into a lanky boy with a serious demeanor and his mother's gift for healing. Rose was spirited and fearless, climbing trees and riding horses almost before she could walk. They added a third child, another boy they named Matthew, who had Clayton's practical nature, and a head for figures that suggested he might be the one to manage the business side of the ranch someday. Through it all, Clayton and Bee's love deepened and matured. They were partners in every sense, supporting each other through difficulties, celebrating successes together, raising their children with love and discipline. They still took rides together when they could, still sat on the porch in the evenings talking, still shared a look across a crowded room that spoke of understanding and affection. One summer evening when they had been married 15 years, Clayton and Bee stood together on the porch, watching their children play in the yard. Daniel, now 13, was teaching 9-year-old Rose and 6-year-old Matthew how to whistle using blades of grass. Their laughter carried on the warm breeze. "You ever think about that first day?" Clayton asked, slipping his arm around Bee's waist. "When I found you with that coyote," Bee leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. "All the time. I think about how brave I thought you were, riding up like that, and how you watched me work with such intensity." "I was mesmerized," Clayton admitted. "I had never seen anything like it. The way you touched that animal, so gentle but so confident." "I remember thinking my ranch needs that gentle touch," Bee laughed softly. "Did you really?" "I really did. Though I did not know then that what I really needed was you in every way. The gentle touch for the animals, yes, but also for me, for my life. You gentled me, Bee, in the best way." She turned in his arms to face him, her eyes suspiciously bright. "And you gave me a place to belong, Clayton. A home, a family, a purpose. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," he corrected, bending to kiss her softly. "And I would do it all again in a heartbeat." "So would I," she whispered against his lips. From the yard, Daniel called out, "Papa, Mama, come see. I got Matthew to do it." They walked down the steps hand in hand to join their children, and Clayton thought about how his life had turned out. He had started with just a ranch and a dream. Now he had a wife he adored, children who filled his days with joy, and a legacy that would continue long after he was gone. As the sun set over the blue mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, the Quincy family laughed together, whole and happy and complete. And Clayton sent up a silent prayer of thanks for that day so long ago, when he had ridden out to check his fence line, and found an auburn-haired woman tending to a wounded coyote, never knowing that she would become his whole world. The seasons continued their endless cycle, and the Quincy Ranch thrived under the care and management of Clayton and Bea. Their reputation grew beyond Pendleton, beyond even Oregon. Ranchers from Idaho and Washington began bringing their valuable animals to Bea when conventional veterinary medicine failed. She never turned anyone away, treating each creature with the same gentle competence she had shown that first coyote. Daniel, as he grew older, became his mother's apprentice in earnest. He had a natural aptitude for animal medicine that even exceeded Bea's, if that was possible. By the time he was 16, he was handling many cases on his own, always under his mother's watchful eye but with increasing independence. "He is going to be something special," Bea told Clayton one night as they prepared for bed. "I think he might actually make it into veterinary school." "Times are changing, Clayton. There are schools now that are starting to accept students based on merit rather than just connections." "If anyone can do it, Daniel can," Clayton agreed. "He has your gift and your determination." Rose, meanwhile, had developed her own interests. She loved the horses, particularly the wild mustangs that occasionally wandered down from the mountains. She had a way of gentling them that was different from Bea's medical touch, but equally effective. She could take a wild, terrified horse and, through patience and understanding, transform it into a willing partner. Clayton saw in her the same kind of quiet strength that had first attracted him to Bea. Matthew, true to Clayton's early assessment, showed more interest in the business side of ranching. He kept careful records of the cattle, tracked market prices, and by the age of 10 could calculate profit margins in his head faster than Clayton could do it on paper. But he was not all business. He had a mischievous streak and a talent for making people laugh that kept the whole family entertained. In 1894, when Clayton and Bea had been married 12 years, the town of Pendleton began planning a major celebration. The railroad had reached them at last, opening up new markets and opportunities. There was to be a week-long festival with rodeos, races, and various competitions. "They want to feature local businesses," Clayton told Bea one evening. "Showcase what makes Pendleton special." "I got a letter today asking if you would be willing to do a demonstration of your veterinary work." Bea looked up from the shirt she was mending, surprised. "A demonstration, in front of people?" "Yes. They think it would be interesting for folks to see, especially since you are one of the only women in the territory doing this kind of work." She bit her lip, considering. "I do not know, Clayton. I am not much for performing." "You would not be performing," he assured her. "Just doing what you do every day. Teaching people. Think about it. There might be other women out there like you with the talent but not the confidence or opportunity. Seeing you could inspire them." That argument won her over, as Clayton had suspected it might. Bea had a generous heart and never missed an opportunity to help or encourage others. The demonstration took place on the third day of the festival. A large crowd gathered in the exhibition arena to watch as Bea examined and treated several animals with various ailments. She explained what she was doing as she worked, her voice calm and confident, her hands sure. Clayton stood at the edge of the arena with his children, watching with pride as his wife impressed the crowd. He saw the amazement on people's faces as she set a dog's broken leg, the wonder as she diagnosed a horse's lameness by watching it walk, the respect as she successfully treated a cow with milk fever. When she finished, the crowd erupted in applause. Women pushed forward to shake her hand, to ask questions, to tell her their own stories. Men who had been skeptical were now believers, having seen her skill firsthand. And several young women, eyes shining with possibility, clustered around her, asking how they might learn to do what she did. "That was amazing, Mama," Rose said as the family walked back to their wagon after the demonstration. "You were so brave, doing that in front of all those people." "I was terrified," Bea admitted with a laugh, "but your father was right. If showing what I do can help even one person find their calling, it was worth it." The festival had another, unexpected consequence. A reporter from Portland had been in attendance, and he wrote a story about Bea that was picked up by newspapers across the West. Suddenly, she was famous, the angel of the animals, as one paper dubbed her. The attention made Bea uncomfortable at first, but Clayton helped her see it as an opportunity. "Think of how many animals you can help now," he pointed out. "People who never would have heard of you now know about your work. And think of the doors this might open for Daniel, or for other young people who want to pursue veterinary medicine." He was right, of course. Invitations began arriving for Bea to speak at agricultural colleges, to consult on difficult cases at ranches throughout the region, even to consider writing a book about her methods. She accepted some invitations and politely declined others, always balancing her work with her responsibilities to her family and the ranch. Through it all, Clayton was her steadfast support. He managed the ranch operations when she traveled, cared for the children, and never once complained about the time her work took her away from home. He was proud of her accomplishments and never felt threatened by her success. "Some men might be bothered by having a famous wife," Martha observed one day when she and Clayton were alone. "Some men are fools," Clayton replied simply. "Bea is remarkable and the world should know it. I knew that the first day I saw her. Why would I want to hide her light under a basket?" Martha smiled. "You are a good man, Clayton Quincy. My niece chose well." "I am the one who chose well," Clayton corrected. "I just got lucky that she chose me back." As the 19th century drew to a close, the Quincy Ranch entered a new phase. Daniel, now 18, had indeed been accepted to veterinary school in Portland, one of the first schools in the West to officially welcome students regardless of gender or background. His acceptance letter specifically mentioned his training under his mother and his demonstrated skill in the field. The day they took him to the train station was bittersweet. Bea was proud beyond measure but also sad to see her firstborn leave home. Clayton held her as they watched the train pull away, Daniel waving from the window. "He will be fine," Clayton murmured into her hair. "He is strong and smart, just like his mother." "I know," Bea said, wiping her eyes. "I just miss him already." "So do I, but he will be back. This is his home. He will always come back." Clayton was right. Daniel did come back, 3 years later with his degree and a fiancée, an intelligent young woman named Sarah whom he had met at school. She was studying to be a teacher, and she and Daniel planned to settle in Pendleton and work together, he as a veterinarian and she teaching at the local school. Rose, meanwhile, had caught the eye of a young rancher from a neighboring property, a quiet, steady man named Thomas Reed who loved horses as much as she did. Clayton liked him immediately, recognizing in Thomas the same kind of solid character he hoped he himself possessed. "He will be good to her," Bea said when Thomas asked for Rose's hand, "and she will be happy with him. They understand each other." The wedding took place in the spring of 1899, a beautiful ceremony in the meadow where Clayton had proposed to Bea all those years ago. Rose was a stunning bride, and Thomas could not take his eyes off her. As Clayton walked his daughter down the makeshift aisle, he thought about the passage of time, how quickly children grew, how precious every moment was. Matthew, now 15, showed no signs of wanting to leave any time soon. He loved the ranch and had already started talking about improvements and expansions, new breeding programs and market opportunities. Clayton knew that when the time came for him to step back, the ranch would be in good hands. As the new century dawned in 1900, Clayton and Bea took stock of their lives. They were both in their 40s now, still healthy and active but aware of their mortality in a way they had not been in their youth. They had built something lasting, something that would continue after they were gone. The ranch, the family, the legacy of care and compassion for animals that Bea had established. One evening, they rode out together to their favorite spot in the high meadow. It was summer, and the wildflowers were in full bloom, a riot of color against the green grass. They dismounted and sat on a flat rock, looking out over the valley that held everything they loved. "You ever regret it?" Bea asked suddenly. "Hiring me that day, taking a chance on a strange woman who was tending to wild animals." Clayton looked at her in surprise. "Regret it?" "Bea, that was the best decision I ever made. You changed my life in every way possible, all for the better." "I changed your life," she laughed. "Clayton, you saved mine. I was lost when I came here, grieving and alone and unsure of my future. You gave me purpose and a home and a family. You gave me love. How could I ever regret that?" He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Then we are agreed, no regrets, only gratitude." "Only gratitude," she echoed softly. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable in each other's presence as only people who have shared a life can be. The sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. "I love you, Beatrice Quincy," Clayton said. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you wrapping that coyote's paw with such gentle hands. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you, Clayton Quincy," Bea replied. "You are my heart, my home, my everything." As darkness fell, they mounted their horses and rode back to the ranch together, side by side as they had been for nearly 2 decades. The house glowed with warm light in the distance, and they could see Matthew on the porch, probably waiting for them. "We are blessed," Bea said as they approached. "Yes," Clayton agreed. "We are." The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as years do. Martha passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by family. Pete followed 2 years later, and the whole ranch mourned the loss of the kind old man who had been such a fixture in their lives. Daniel and Sarah had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, all of whom showed promise of inheriting the family gift with animals. Rose and Thomas had 4 children and expanded their ranch significantly, becoming one of the most successful horse breeding operations in Oregon. Matthew married a practical, intelligent woman named Emma, and together they took on more and more of the ranch management, allowing Clayton and Bea to slow down a bit. Clayton and Bea became grandparents, then great-grandparents. They watched their family grow and spread, always remaining the center around which everyone orbited. Their love story became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. "Tell us again how Grandpa found Grandma," the grandchildren would beg, and Clayton or Bea would smile and recount the story of the coyote and the gentle hands and the decision that changed 2 lives. In 1915, Clayton and Bea celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. The family threw a huge party at the ranch, with people coming from all over the state to honor the couple. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, enough food to feed an army. At one point in the evening, Clayton pulled Bea aside to a quiet corner. He held both her hands in his and looked into her eyes, still that striking gray-green that had captivated him so long ago. 30 years, he said wonderingly. "It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." "I know what you mean," Bea replied. "So much has changed, but this us has stayed constant." "You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," Clayton said. "And the strongest, the kindest, the most remarkable person I know. Marrying you was the smartest thing I ever did." "Oh, Clayton," Bee's eyes filled with tears. "You are going to make me cry, and then everyone will wonder what is wrong." "Let them wonder," he said, pulling her close. "Let them see that after 30 years I still make you cry happy tears." She laughed through her tears and kissed him, and their children and grandchildren, seeing them, smiled and let them have their moment. Clayton and Bee lived to see the automobile become common, to see the First World War come and go, to see women finally get the right to vote in 1920. They saw their children succeed and their grandchildren grow. They saw the ranch expand to over 5,000 acres, one of the largest and most respected operations in eastern Oregon. Through it all, they remained devoted to each other. Even as their hair turned white and their steps slowed, the love between them never diminished. They still held hands, still stole kisses when they thought no one was looking, still sat on the porch in the evenings and talked about their day. In 1925, when Clayton was 69 and Bee was 67, they took one last ride together to the high meadow. It was autumn, their favorite season, and the aspens were golden against the blue sky. They sat on their familiar rock, looking out over the valley. "I have had a good life," Clayton said quietly, "better than I ever dreamed possible." "So have I," Bee agreed, leaning against him. "And it is not over yet, we still have time." "I hope so," Clayton said. "But whether we have a day or a decade, I want you to know that loving you has been the greatest joy and privilege of my life." Bee turned to look at him, and he saw his own feelings reflected in her eyes. "And loving you has been mine. Whatever comes, Clayton, we face it together, always together." "Always," he promised. They stayed in the meadow until the sun began to set, then rode slowly back to the ranch, back to the life they had built together. The house was full when they arrived. Matthew and Emma lived there now with their children, but there was always room for Clayton and Bee, always would be. That evening, surrounded by family, Clayton looked around the table and felt profound contentment. This was what it was all about, this legacy of love and hard work and compassion. This was what he and Bee had created together. Clayton lived another 5 years, passing away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 74 in 1930. Bee held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering words of love and promises to see him again someday. The entire town turned out for his funeral, testament to the respect he had earned over a lifetime. Bee lived on for 3 more years, cared for lovingly by her family. She remained sharp and engaged until the end, still advising on difficult animal cases, still telling stories to her great-grandchildren, still talking about Clayton as if he had just stepped out of the room and would be back any moment. When she died in 1933 at the age of 75, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, her last words were, "I am coming, Clayton. Wait for me." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a large oak tree they had planted together on their first anniversary. The headstone was simple, bearing their names and dates and a single line that Matthew had chosen. "Together in life, together in death, forever in love." The Quincy Ranch continued for generations after them, always in the family, always carrying on the traditions of care and compassion that Clayton and Bee had established. Daniel's children went on to open the first veterinary clinic in Pendleton. Rose's descendants continued their horse breeding program. Matthew's great-grandson eventually expanded the ranch to over 10,000 acres. But more than the land or the success, what Clayton and Bee left behind was a legacy of love. Every member of their family knew the story of how they met, how he watched her tend that wounded coyote and knew she was special, how he offered her a job and she accepted, how they fell in love against all odds and built a life together that was rich beyond measure. Their story was told at weddings and anniversaries, shared with each new generation as an example of what true love could be. Not perfect or without challenges, but real and lasting and worth fighting for. And on quiet evenings, when family gathered at the ranch house and sat on that wide porch looking out over the land, they could almost feel the presence of Clayton and Bee still together, still watching over the home they built and the family they created. The ranch stood as a monument to their love, acres of land testifying to hard work and dedication. But the real monument was in the hearts of their descendants, in the values they had passed down, in the example they had set of what it meant to love truly and completely, to build something lasting, to leave the world better than they found it. And sometimes, on golden autumn evenings when the aspens turned gold and the air smelled of wood smoke and coming winter, people swore they could see two figures on horseback in the high meadow, riding side by side as they had done so many times in life, still together, still in love, still finding beauty in the land and in each other. The story of Clayton and Bee became more than just family history. It became part of the fabric of Pendleton itself, a reminder that love could flourish even in the harsh landscape of the frontier, that two people finding each other at the right moment could change not just their own lives, but the lives of generations to come. In the years following Bee's death, the family made sure their story was preserved. Matthew compiled their letters, Bee's journals, and the records of the ranch into a family history that was carefully maintained. Daniel wrote a biography of his mother that was published regionally and became required reading at several veterinary schools. The cabin where Bee had first lived on the ranch was preserved and eventually became a small museum of sorts, displaying her original medical instruments, photographs, and personal effects. Visitors to the ranch could see where she had worked, learn about her pioneering methods, and understand the impact she had made not just on animal care, but on the role of women in veterinary medicine. But beyond the historical preservation, beyond the records and museums, the real legacy of Clayton and Bee lived on in the everyday lives of their family, in the way they treated animals with respect and compassion, in the way they welcomed strangers and gave people second chances, in the way they loved each other and their children, building strong foundations for the future. Great-great-grandchildren who never met Clayton and Bee still grew up hearing about them, still felt connected to them through the stories. They learned that Clayton had watched Bee tend a wounded coyote and immediately recognized something special in her gentle touch. They learned that he had offered her a job when she needed it most, that she had accepted and proven herself invaluable. They learned that love had grown between them naturally, inevitably, two lonely souls finding completion in each other. The family made it a tradition to gather at the ranch every year on the anniversary of Clayton and Bee's wedding. Dozens of people would come, sometimes over 100, representing multiple generations of the Quincy family. They would share a meal, tell stories, remember those who had gone before, and always, at sunset, they would walk together to the hill where Clayton and Bee were buried. Someone would place fresh flowers on the grave, usually wildflowers picked from the meadow they had loved. Someone else would read a passage from Bee's journal or one of Clayton's letters. And they would stand together in silence for a moment, each person reflecting on what the couple had meant to their family. The ranch itself evolved with the times but never lost its essential character. It weathered the Great Depression, though times were hard. It adapted to new technologies and methods while still maintaining the commitment to animal welfare that Bee had instilled. It survived droughts and market crashes, changing economies and social upheaval. Through it all, each generation of Quincy children learned the story of their great-great-great-grandparents, learned the values they had embodied, learned that love and hard work and integrity were worth more than any amount of money or success. They learned that a gentle touch could heal more than just physical wounds, that compassion was strength, that two people committed to each other could overcome any obstacle. The town of Pendleton itself never forgot Clayton and Bea. When the town celebrated its centennial in the 1960s, the Quincy couple was featured prominently in the historical exhibits. The local historical society maintained extensive files on them, and schoolchildren regularly wrote reports about Beatrice Dalton Quincy, the pioneering veterinarian who had broken barriers and saved countless animals. A statue was erected in the town square in 1975, depicting a woman kneeling beside a coyote, her hands gentle on its leg. A man stood nearby, hat in hand, watching with obvious admiration. The plaque read, "In honor of Beatrice and Clayton Quincy. She healed with gentle hands, he loved with an open heart, together they built a legacy." As the 20th century gave way to the 21st, the Quincy Ranch remained in family hands, now operated by the 6th and 7th generations descended from Clayton and Bea. The main house had been expanded and modernized, but the bones of it were still the same structure Clayton had lived in, the home he had brought Bea to as his bride. The high meadow remained protected, never developed or altered. Family members still rode up there, still sat on that flat rock and looked out over the valley. Proposals happened there, as they had since Clayton first asked Bea to marry him in that spot. It was considered sacred ground, a place where the presence of the original Clayton and Bea felt strongest. The medical instruments Bea had used were eventually donated to a veterinary museum, where they were displayed alongside information about her innovative techniques and her influence on the field. Veterinary students from around the world came to see them, to learn about the self-taught woman who had become one of the most respected animal healers of her time. But perhaps the most important legacy Clayton and Bea left was not in museums or history books. It was in the intangible things, the values and lessons that could not be displayed or preserved except in the living of them. They had shown their family what it meant to love well, to work hard, to treat all creatures with kindness. They had demonstrated that circumstances did not have to define you, that losses could be overcome, that starting over was possible. Every member of their family who entered a marriage did so with the example of Clayton and Bea before them. They knew what a good marriage looked like, how partners should support and respect each other, how love could deepen and grow over decades. The divorce rate in the Quincy family was remarkably low, not because the family was perfect, but because they had a template for how to do it right. Every member who chose a career did so knowing they had the family's support, regardless of how unconventional the choice might be. Bea had been a woman in a man's profession, had succeeded against all odds, and the family honored that by encouraging each person to pursue their passion without regard to gender or social expectations. Every member who faced hardship knew they had a family behind them, ready to help, because Clayton and Bea had built a culture of support and mutual aid. No one faced their troubles alone, just as Clayton and Bea had never faced theirs alone once they found each other. And so the story came full circle. What had begun with a lonely cowboy and a grieving woman and a wounded coyote had grown into something far larger than either of them could have imagined. Their love had rippled outward through time, touching hundreds of lives, shaping the future in ways both large and small. The land they had worked remained productive and beautiful. The animals they and their descendants had cared for numbered in the thousands. The children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren they had raised and influenced spread across the country, carrying the lessons they had learned. But more than anything, Clayton and Bea had proven that love was real, that it could last, that it was worth every risk and sacrifice. They had shown that two imperfect people, finding each other at the right moment and committing to build a life together, could create something beautiful and enduring. On the ranch, in the house they had shared, their portraits hung side by side in the main hall. Clayton in his prime, strong and handsome, his eyes kind. Bea beside him, her gentle strength evident even in a photograph. Every member of the family passed those portraits daily, and every one of them knew the story they represented. It was a story of courage and compassion, of taking chances and seeing them through. It was a story of healing, both of animals and of human hearts. It was a story of building something lasting in a harsh and beautiful land. But most of all, it was a love story, pure and simple and true. The gentle touch that Clayton had recognized that first day had indeed been exactly what his ranch needed. But it was what he had needed too, what his life had been missing, what his future required. And Bea, who had thought her life was over when her parents died, had found not just work but purpose, not just shelter but home, not just an employer but a partner and soulmate. Their story endured because it spoke to something universal, something that transcended time and place. The human need for connection, for love, for someone who sees us truly and values what they see. The hope that even in the hardest times, joy can be found. The belief that with the right person beside us, anything is possible. And so the legacy continued, generation after generation, each one adding their own chapter to the story, but always rooted in that first meeting, that moment when Clayton Quincy watched Beatrice Dalton tend a wounded coyote with gentle hands and knew his search was over. He had found what he had been looking for without even knowing he was looking. She had found a new beginning when she thought her story was ending. Together, they had built something that would outlast them both, something that would speak to their love and their values long after they were gone. The ranch, the family, the example they set, all of it testified to the power of two people finding each other and choosing every day to build a life together. And in the end, that was the real story. Not just the dramatic meeting or the beautiful wedding or the successful ranch, but the daily choice to love, to support, to be present for each other through everything life brought. That was what made their story special, what made it worth telling and retelling, what made it a legacy worth leaving. Clayton and Bea Quincy had lived well and loved well. They had left the world better than they found it. And their story, begun on a dusty creek bank in Oregon in 1882, continued to inspire and guide their family more than a century later, a testament to the enduring power of love, compassion, and two hearts finding their home in each other.